What's up there, guys? Thanks for tuning in. This is Rick. You're watching Fanfare for the Conscious. And in the video today, we're going to be talking about Darwinism, evolution, natural selection, and the misinterpretations and manipulations that have been made to this man's theories and his work. Let's dive in. So when we talk about Darwin, I'm going to just start a little bit with the common things that are known about him. And we're going to discuss his theory of evolution, his personal beliefs, his theory of natural selection, and then a couple of quotes as well, which some of you will have heard, some of you wouldn't have heard. And we're going to discuss a little bit how the essence of his work has actually been manipulated in order to promote a system of brutality and force and domination of one being over another. But first, before we start discussing that, we're going to go through a little bit of the common knowledge that is easily available on Wikipedia. You can go and have a look. This is the sort of the mainstream understanding of exactly what Charles Robert Darwin was all about. So as mentioned before, he was most famous for his theory of evolution, of natural selection as well, and differentiation of the species. His work, his most famous text, is known as On the Origin of Species, whereby he tried to understand the rules and laws which allowed the varying species and the complexity of all the different creatures on the planet and how they came about. So Charles Robert Darwin was born in 1809, in February, I believe, and died in 1882. He was a naturalist, a geologist, and a biologist. Now, first, I think that's quite interesting to note because I think very few scientists would differentiate themselves nowadays into as many fields as even those three. Most are very, very focused on a single individual field, which might necessarily make them a little bit more blind to other ideas which are going on and make their views quite reductionist. Now, Darwin had a little bit broader spectrum of knowledge, hence he allowed him then to bring a lot of different ideas from a lot of different scientific disciplines together and allow him to form his theories. So his main theories, like we mentioned before, were his theory of evolution and natural selection. Now, the theory of evolution is quite simple, and it's that random mutations in DNA over time can cause species-wide changes and differentiation. And this is how the sort of species family tree works. Different parts of a given species become isolated or separated from the other members of its species. So it is now existing in a slightly different environment. And the natural mutations, which were occurring randomly, now you'll notice that I'm putting random there in air quotes, and I'll talk a little bit about exactly why I'm doing that in a moment. But suffice to say, these random mutations will then allow members of that species to either more easily or less easily adapt to their surroundings. Okay, and this is where we come into natural selection. So these mutations are then selected, again, notice the air quotes, selected for, against, based on their suitability. Now, what does that mean exactly? What it means is that there are small incremental changes which take place in a species over time, which make it either more suited to its environment or less suited to its environment. Examples of individuals within a species that are more suited are more likely to survive and more likely to then pass on those genes to their progeny. The more different then entities there are that display these characteristics, the more likely they are to start to push out other competing characteristics and therefore produce an overall change in the species over time and therefore differentiation. Okay? You'll notice here, okay, these two words that I've put in these air quotes. We've got random and we've got selected. Now, random is one of those words, it's quite interesting because a lot of the things that are perceived from a given standpoint to be random could arguably not be random. Think about a random number generator in a computer. They are not actually random. because if you can determine what it was the seed input, so you get a given value that's put into an equation in a random number generator in a computer, if you know what that input value is, then you can follow the calculations in the remainder of that random number generator in order to output the answer. So it is predictable. It's not actually truly random. It just appears to be random since we are unable to access exactly what that seed input is. If we to know that seed input, then we would know the outcome and it would no longer be random. Now this is a really, really good analogy for the universe here, because chaos theory says it's almost impossible for us to know all the individual interactions that are likely going on. Because we can't be aware of all those interactions that are going on, it's impossible for us to predict the outcome, and therefore it is seen to be random. However, if we were in a position where we could actually model all of the individual inputs and all the different variables of a given random system, then we would then be able to predict what the outcome of that randomness was, and it would cease to be random. The other thing that's quite interesting to note here is this use of the word selected, and he does actually use the word selected for or against. Now, selection implies some sort of intelligence and some sort of choice. Now, I don't believe that, based on a lot of what I've read about Darwin and what I've seen of his quotes and what I understand of his background, I don't believe that he necessarily thought of God as being the bearded man in the sky with human emotions. I think he saw God as being the rules of the universe itself in a very sort of similar manner to the way I understand God to be. Again, I'll discuss my exact opinions on God and how I've come to those in a later video, but suffice to say, when you hear me use the word God, don't think of the bearded man in the sky, the God of Abrahamic religions, Christianity, Islam, Judaism. Don't think of that. Think of it more as the mind of God in the terms that great physicists have described it, as in the laws of the universe, the innate intelligence of the system which brought the universe into being in the first place. But you'll notice he does use this word selected, which implies that sort of intellectual influence, that intelligent influence on the system itself. So I'm going to quickly now just go through a couple of the quotes which I found quite salient in this particular subject, and one of them you will have heard, another one possibly not. So we'll start with the one that you will have heard quite a lot, and the one which has been most misrepresented. So what Darwin said was, it is not the strongest of the species that survive, nor the most intelligent. It is the one that is most adaptable to change. Now, this is Darwin's idea of fitness, and fitness has been co-opted a little bit in the modern language, and it seems to refer to strength, actual physical fitness and physical strength, when Darwin was talking about the term fit more as in a jigsaw puzzle, the way a piece fits into a whole. He's talking about organisms best fitting their environment, the ones that most easily integrate themselves into the biosphere in which they find themselves existing. So now I'm going to come to a second quote, which is the one that you guys most likely haven't heard. If you have, my apologies, but I thought it was also really, really important to draw people's attention to. And the second quote is, "In the long history of mankind, those who learned to collaborate and improvise most effectively have prevailed." Now, the reason I particularly like this quote is because you're starting to see a word here which is not normally associated with Darwinism, which is collaboration. A lot of the time when mainstream science is talking about Darwin and Darwinism, natural selection, evolution, they are talking about competition. Now, competition is a form of collaboration. It is various entities working individually towards achieving a goal, with the most successful one being the winner in the end. It's a way that nature allows itself to explore as many different possibilities as possible in order to come to the correct conclusion and the most efficient manner of achieving a given goal. And this is the sort of the crux now of what I determine to be the sort of the misinterpretation and the misrepresentation of what Darwinism really is about. Now, a lot of you people won't know that Darwin was a theist. He was not agnostic, he was not atheist, he was a believer in God. He believed in some sort of creator energy, some sort of intelligence to the universe, and believed that God was to be found in the laws which govern and create and allow the self-creation and modification and adaptation of the beings and entities within the universe. And I find this very, very interesting because Darwin is often held up as being one of the proofs against creationism. Now, I'm sure if you can imagine, and Darwin even said this himself, that you're trying to explain the individual creation of every single entity, every single creature, every single rock, then you're looking at more like an artist drawing each individual, okay? You're looking at God as an engineer more so than anything else, someone who actually physically is involved in creating the system. Now, what Darwin was actually arguing, and what I would argue, is that God is not the creator, he is the system itself. It is the system that allows self-creation, that allows self-modification, the system of attempt and trial and error and reattempt, this complete cycle of continuous feedback where the universe is testing things and getting the results and trying again and repeating that process over and over and over again. And a lot of people who subscribe to this idea of Darwinism will talk about evolution and life as some sort of battleground, some sort of war. And if you watch any David Attenborough documentary, or really any natural science documentary where they're looking at the natural world, they talk about this war between the various elements. And sure, if you boil the savannah down to the battle between the lion and the antelope, then yeah, it does look like a war. If you boil it down to the interactions between any two individuals, then it can quite easily be perceived to be a sort of battle of wills, an arms race, if you will, where they are always trying to one-up the other one. However, when you actually step back from that individual battle and start to look at the whole landscape, you realise that nature is not this battle, it is a dance. In the same way, you could look at the way the lead and the follow in a dance routine, there appears to be this battle of energies where one entity is always pushing itself on the other and always leading the other and always commanding the other to follow. But in reality, it is this delicate interaction between the two, and the dance does not work if both dancers are not following the same rules. Nature is not this war, it is not this battleground, it is not this arms race as has been presented by the false representation of Darwinism, natural selection and evolution. What it is this continual readjustment, this dance, this constant flow from one state to another, where things are always shifting and trying to best fill all the available niches on planet Earth and elsewhere. When you look at the Earth alone, you can see that life always finds a way. There are no places on this planet where life does not exist. In the harshest environments, you will always find life. Around the volcanic vents deep at the bottom of the ocean, inside the very pack ice of our poles, you will find life. And that is because of this innate need for life to try and fill every single niche, and to do that in the most efficient way possible. Conclusions. Darwinism, some brilliant ideas when we actually get down to the core of it. A beautiful way of describing how the interactions between various species on the planet produce balance and allow life to permeate throughout all environments. when misrepresented, it has been one of the tools which has justified the great evils of the capitalist system, where it has convinced us that instead of being this dance, it is a war, that instead of being this competitive cooperation, it is this brutal domination. So going to back to the crux of this whole thing, very, very quick summary. Evolution is not about having the biggest stick to beat your opponent with. It is about proving that you are the most adaptable, and you are the most able to change, and you are the most able to integrate yourself into the system of which you are a part. Because we all rely on the interactions between the various entities within our system, the interactions between the trees and the insects and the birds and the animals, and then back to the trees again. And it's only by understanding this system to be this holistic and very, very complex dance with multiple different partners, all dancing to slightly different tunes, but all ultimately within the same rhythms, that we can start to truly understand what Darwin was really talking about with evolution and natural selection. If you've enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell notification icon to make sure you're always updated with regards to any of my new content. If you want to speak with me in person, head over to lawfulbank.com. We are a growing community of wonderful, sovereign, living human beings who are determined to take our power back and reassert our right to govern ourselves in this world. If you are an American and you want to know more about how this process is being done, go and check out AnnaVonRights.com. Head over to the AmericanStatesAssembly.net and register yourself as a unique, lawful living being. Protect your family, protect your homes, protect your livelihood, and reconstitute your power as the people who run your own country. That just leaves me to say, thank you very much for watching, guys. Take care of yourselves, stay free, think free, and act free. I'll see you next time.